and welcome to another fun-filled episode of Back for Our Future. Jeez Louise. Back for Our Future, the show that goes back to help us understand a little bit more about our future and your future and all the futures. The future. With me today, as always, is the man with the steel trap memory. I got to come up with some other catch lines. I'll work on those. the man whose memory is like a sieve. I don't know if that works either. Tony Nick Najati. Tony, good to see you again. How are you, brother?
Good, man. You know, the thing is about being the historian and the steel trap guy is that somebody that's listening to this podcast said that's just another word for old.
Whoever that is, shame. Shame on you, madam or sir. Shame. It's not old. So little housekeeping, just so you guys and gals and folks know, this is the first episode we've recorded. So just so you guys know, we've banked a few, but this is the first episode we've recorded, and we would like to both publicly shame you for not giving us reviews. No, I'm just kidding. You've given us great reviews. The thing that I was most excited about is seeing how people reacted to the show. On my side of the thing, and I'll let Tony talk about his, on my side of it, I got a lot of feedback, lots of people suddenly just sending me their favorite movies. It obviously opened up a great conversation, which is exactly what we wanted to have happen. And it was people from the city of Mobile and people from Los Angeles and people from Hattiesburg, Mississippi. So it's lots of different people saying this stuff and giving us feedback. I did have a bunch of corrections that editorial corrections from my mother from that first episode that needed to get published. And the first one that she was very adamant that I make a clearance on is that it was not my father's hunting camp, but my uncle's hunting camp that had the pornography. She God love her. She called me and she was like, and she just started listing off stuff. And I was like, I'm going to post the one. This is the one you get. I'm going to post the correction that it would. She was worried that I made it sound like it was my dad's hunting camp with porn. It was not. In fact, it was my uncle's hunting camp. So someone's getting thrown under the bus, and apparently it's going to be my uncle this week. Yeah, there we go.
That's rough.
How's the feedback been for you? What have you, any good notes?
It's been good, man. I mean, everyone's been pretty happy with it for the most part, and I'm appreciative of that very much. Love to get some more of those reviews. Love to get some more of those ratings, and they don't always have to be positive. If you don't like it, that's fine too. But we'd love to see it.
Yeah, it does help. I mean, if anything else, it helps us. Look, this is a new show, and it's kind of exploratory in nature. I mean, we have an agenda of a timeline, but where we go with inside of that and how we approach things, that we're following something, but we also want to make sure that we're providing entertainment. That's the point. But we want to make sure we're keeping with history. So it's a balancing act type thing. So again, the feedback's great, good or bad. We don't care. You can always do that. A little bit of housekeeping. If you haven't checked us out on Twitter, you can do that. It is back with the number 4, our future. And if you go to Facebook, it's Back for Our Future podcast, correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
There you go.
Correct.
That's right. And so if you jump over there, you can hang out with us. But that's enough of the housekeeping. Let's get into the show. No one likes a long ad. Here, let's set some things up here, right? So we've given you guys a little bit of history of theaters, but there's lots of them that mean stuff. And we talk about the Village 6, very important theater to me and Tony. In that episode, when it comes out, we'll have a lot more detail to it. We talked about the Twin. We've talked about all these different theaters that we would go see these movies in growing up and hanging out and all that kind of stuff. But this one, this episode zeroes in a little bit on something fun, which was the good old fashioned dollar theater, which no longer exists on this planet anywhere. I think they're still second run theaters, but I don't think they're a dollar. I don't even know how they stayed in business, but they did somehow. So we're calling this episode Dollar Theater Detention, and we're going to tee up a few different things. There's lots of great movies lined up. Some of which I didn't even remember when we did our pre-show notes. Fun to have a discussion on. So, Tony, tee us up, buddy. Where are we at? What are we looking at?
Well, the Dollar Theater was always great. It was, again, in this weird spot off of Airport Boulevard in the downtowner area. And, again, we've talked about the mall situation off Airport Boulevard with 2 malls being right across the street from each other. And then down the street, not all that far away, is another essentially outdoor mall in the Festival Center.
That's right.
In the Festival Center, there's lots of great things in there, including the first Walmart in Mobile, Alabama. But there's also
And that was,
Yeah.
well, the first Walmart there is interesting because I remember explicitly going into it. And this is back when Walmart, in case some people don't remember, fun fact, everything inside of Walmart used to be made in the USA. That's no longer the case. Everything in Walmart is made in China. But back in the heyday, it was it was all made in the USA. And it was very proudly, there was very prominent on the Mr. Sam's and the Sam's Choice or whatever it was. On all that stuff, you had this made in USA. So just fun fact, first Walmart in the city, it was a big deal. I remember there being like a grand opening. It was a whole thing. For whatever reason, I remember that very explicitly. Not too far away from the service merchandise, in which you received your items on a conveyor belt.
Yeah.
And I have had a lot of G.I. Joes delivered to me on a freaking conveyor belt.
And also about the Walmart, this is before the superstores and stuff like that. So this was not a grocery store or anything. It was just explicitly goods. That's all it was.
That's right.
And so it was much smaller than the super Walmarts that people have gotten to know over the years.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, so we're in the festival center. We got a Walmart. We got a Farmore. I know there was some other.
Oh yeah, there's a bunch of stuff in there. There's a grocery store called Welcome that's in there.
I don't remember that. Don't remember that one.
I'm a Del Champs eventually, and then get shut down altogether. But I mean, Del Champs bought them out. But and for people who aren't in Mobile, Alabama, you probably don't even know what any of these places are. But that's okay. But on the corner, back behind the gym, which was like a Gold's Gym that was on the corner inside the festival.
Sure was.
On the back side of that, on the opposite end of the festival center, on the back side of it, there was an entire parking lot dedicated just for the movie theater, which was on a corner. And it was called Movies 10. You could get into this place exactly for $1. After 6 p.m., it was $1.50. And I saw tons of movies there. I love lived there.
Let me set the stage for Movies 10 just a little bit. It after a while it was no longer known as Movies 10. In fact, I don't even, if you bring it up, most people in this area or from that time frame would call it Dollar Theater because that's what we all knew it as. That was like the slang term. And all of our friend group would be like, "Hey, we're going to the Dollar Theater," whatever it would be. Now, the thing about this theater, to try and do our best to paint a picture of what it was, this is the most. So if you imagine, those of us that are old enough that have seen the very beginning graphics for Saved by the Bell with the squiggly lines and the blue and the weird amoeba looking shapes, that if you took that artwork and made it 3D and slapped it into a movie theater, that's the kind of vibe it had in there. There was some green and yellow, but it was that very 90s, ultra 90s looking space, right? And it was, I also remember it always feeling a little dank inside of there. It was always a little bit dank. It was just a little bit wet feeling for some reason. I don't know why, but that's the memory I have of it. So it was very, very, very dated specifically for 1992 or whenever it opened. I'm sure it was like in 90 or something, but
yeah, it was like
87. It was a very dated 87. So there you go. So it's in that heyday of making that conversion from the 80s into the 90s. Very dated theater, just so you know where we're coming from on that side, just to do my best to paint a picture for you.
Yeah. But man, it was a glorious place. It was fantastic. I mean, it was the best place there ever was. I mean, it's at some point, and it doesn't happen in 1982, but there'll be, because the Movies 10, when you walked in, it opened up into a corridor like a breezeway. And on the other side of that breezeway, there will eventually be a Chicago's Best Pizza. You remember that place?
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That was good stuff. I remember now.
We had the first Chicago's Best Pizza right next to us where we lived, on the corner near the corner of Hillcrest and Cottage Hill. But this would be the second location, and it would be right next to it. So there would be the great movie theater, and then there'd be a Chicago's Best right next to it. So it was kind of a cool thing.
Do you remember the pizza? Because in my mind now, it seems like it was square.
Yeah. So Chicago's Best,
which is Detroit.
Well,
which is Detroit pizza.
No. A lot of people don't understand that because it's like a lot of people think Chicago, they think deep dish pizza. That's one
Yeah,
of the things that Chicago is known for. But when you go
right.
into a pub, like a Chicago, like a proper Chicago pub, it is a square pizza. You'll
Mm,
get square pizza when you go in there. I mean, that's just the facts. It's a little thicker than it's like St. Louis style, which is like more of a
yep,
cracker crust, but it's a little
yep.
bit thicker than that. But it's still cut in squares, and so that's
What
what
do you
it was.
think, Davey? What do you think old Davey Pizza Boy would give that rating nowadays? Dave Portnoy.
I did like that pizza a lot though, because I mean,
I do
other
too. I remember it.
other than that place, everything else in Mobile was pretty much a chain for pizza.
Yeah, that's right. It was it's so funny enough, one of the big chains, and we'll get back on topic. This is how the show goes, folks. But one of the, and it is near lunchtime for us while we're recording, but one of the one of the chains that was here was Godfather's.
Right?
And and listen, Godfather's had one pizza that is legendary, and it was the taco pizza. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah.
Have you had a taco pizza in a while?
I've not had. I don't think I've had taco pizza since then.
Let me tell you something. There's still one Godfather's in Mobile, Alabama.
There is. I know.
And me and the bike gang, it's right by, I can't say exactly where it is, but it's near a location that we like to ride our bikes. Long story short, we went and grabbed a taco pizza, and nobody had ever had one that was with me. And I just have this fond memory. Listen, me and my dad both. My dad has this food memory where like food is like on this epic level for him. But then when he tastes it, he's like, this isn't right. It's like his memory tastes better than anything else, right? Nostalgia flavoring. But I go and we get a taco pizza, and this soiree of pirates, of bike pirates, they devour this pizza in seconds because they've never had it. And dude, it holds up. That is still to this day, for a chain pizza, although there's very few chains left, or Godfather's left, is one of the best things in the world. I just shout out real quick. I know we're going to get to pick of the week, but I'm also going to throw in my pick of the week right now, which is Godfather's Taco Pizza. If it's worth traveling for, folks, it's worth traveling for. And when we do our live show one day, everybody's going to get a God. That's not true. I can't promise that. I can't promise. All right, so here we are. We have Chicago's best pizza, which is amazing. I do remember it. I kind of want to go look it up and see if I can figure out how to hack that. That would be amazing.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt and go on a tangent, but that's the show. Set up the rest of the theater side of things and talk us through it.
So yeah, I mean that theater was just on Airport and Downtowner. It kind of crossed. It was kind of both areas, and then I would be ending up at a school that literally ran perpendicular to that theater. If you go down the street of my school, it would literally run into that theater. That was what formed the T to that street. And so I could literally go to school, leave school, go see a movie.
Right.
Right down the street. Which was great.
Yeah, it is right around the corner. And we both ended up at that school eventually. I ended up there as well, but it is right around the corner. You were there a few years ahead of me, obviously. So I imagine you amassed quite the number of movies.
I did. So basically, I mean, obviously we've established that I came from New Jersey and was more of a public school guy and everything else. I ended up at, St. Paul's, which good school. I know your daughters go there and stuff like that. But I mean, it was a private school, and I was, felt a little out of place, I met some of my lifelong friends there. But still, and then I ended up at Murphy for like a semester and hated it. Freshman year of high school, couldn't stand it. So I was a little behind because I was leaving that school. So St. Paul's was kind of like, yeah, it's a little late in the school year because it was like February, March. And they're like, a little late in the school year to start back here. Why don't you go to this other school? And it was the Arnold School. And it's like 55 students, and you're one-on-one
Right.
with teachers. And it catches you up really quick, because you're going at your own pace. I'm a smart guy, I can do it. And so it's one of those things. And the next thing you know, finished the year, enjoyed it so much, stayed all 4 years.
Yeah. And listen, I got to give a shout out to that same school. I ended up there in my senior year. Long story short, how I got there, but I ended up there in my senior year, and I had a teacher, and she was I remember her being, you know, a nice looking lady, but her name happened to also be Mrs. Robinson. And she was the English teacher.
I knew you were gonna say that.
And I've long credited in multiple interviews and other things I've ever done, if I ever did press and people ask me about my film career or whatever it was. And I do attribute, like, I always wanted to be a filmmaker. Like, that was my dream growing up. But like, she was the first teacher that really embraced that side of me, like knew how to communicate to me about my creativity and how to use it. It's as if she, I don't know if she was very creative or not. I don't remember, but I do know that she understood a creative and she was able to communicate in such a way. Like, that lady, it's not that she saved my life, but she definitely gave me a destiny and helped me shape my destiny moving forward. So I owe a tremendous amount of my livelihood. Frankly, my children, everything that comes from my career comes from, it starts with that teacher. And she was, there's no mistake while I was there why I was there rather, is that there's no coincidence on that. It was a literal, like a God thing for me, is that I was destined to be there, and she made things change. So anyway, Arnold School was a great place and it means a lot to us. Has a weird rap in the city of Mobile, in the history of things. There's a lot of, we won't say the names of things that were said about it, but it for me was, again, one of the greatest things that ever happened in my high school career. So You're at Arnold School, you got the opportunity, you go see movies.
Oh yeah.
It's 92. There's a lot of great stuff. Hit me with them. Let's go, baby.
Yeah. Well, so, obviously we had been to the theater a bunch before 1992, but these would be the movies that started seeing once I went to school there. And we'll start off with a movie that is not among my favorites, The Medicine Man, starring Sean Connery and Lorraine Bracco. I got to be honest with you, I get a lot of flack in my life because I don't often hate movies. I've caught a lot of flack about this, and I tell people the same thing that I always tell people, which is I don't talk about the movies I don't like. I talk about the movies that I like because I want to publicize those films. This would be one of the movies that I wasn't a monster fan of. It was okay. It wasn't great. It looked so good in the trailer, and it was just not a good film.
It's a masterfully cut trailer. I'm laughing so hard because to the people that can't see me, I'm laughing off camera as much as I can, or off mic, is that as long as I've known Tony, there's a couple of legendary films that have always lived with him as being movies, the movies, and it's not many, folks, the movies that I know of 20, 30 years or whatever we've established of knowing you that have made this list. Medicine Man is one. Nell is another one.
Right.
Yeah. So Medicine Man being one of those, I remember seeing this film as well. And the memory I have of this movie, because it was very, were they looking for a cure for cancer? Was it something like that?
He's working for a company, and he's in the jungle looking for a cure for cancer, and they send him an assistant, and that assistant will be the Sopranos' own Lorraine Bracco, pre-Sopranos, of course, and they eventually fall in love in the jungle while looking for the cure for cancer.
Isn't there something to do with ants? Is there something to do with ants in that movie?
There's a lot to do with a lot of things in that movie, but it's not good.
So the only memory I have of that movie is I remember seeing it, and the only memory I have is I think there's a part where they have zip lines, and they're using zip lines in the trees. That's what sticks with me. That's what I remember about that movie, is that and something with ants. If you know about the ants, because neither one of us have reviewed this movie recently, please just post in the comments. Give us some ants. Covered in ants, baby. Covered in ants.
There is a situation with ants where she has to take off her clothes and stuff like that, and yeah, it's there. It's just they cut the trailer like an action movie, and it's not an action movie. It is
definitely not an action movie.
Bad love story in the jungle with Sean Connery, and it's not really great at all.
Okay. Well, note this episode, folks. Episode number 4, you got your first visit into TonyHatesMovies.com. Right. So yeah, Medicine Man, not a winner, not a winner for Sean Connery, not a movie that's probably remembered by many, and definitely I can't imagine this movie. I'll let you get there with it. I can't imagine this movie shows up on the homework for the week, the Tony's picks of the week. I don't think this will be in the mix.
This will not be there.
Yeah, there we go. So I didn't remember that this happened because it's not the movie I thought it was. So I'm looking at the list of our show notes and I'm like, oh my God, the movie Gladiator.
Yeah.
But it is not the movie Gladiator. This is not Fields of Elysium.
No, this is not Russell Crowe. This is James Marshall and Cuba Gooding Jr. and Brian Dennehy battling in the underground world of boxing. And it was magnificent. It's a good movie. It's really good. I enjoyed it a lot. It was James Marshall kind of plays a troubled kid who kind of.
I don't even know who James Marshall is. Can you
There's a lot of people who
remind
probably
me?
don't know who he is, quite honestly, because he's not been in a ton of stuff lately, and he's kind of a guy of the times. So, I mean, I'm not going to be able to ring too many bells with explaining him too much. So let's just move on. So, so Cuba Gooding Jr. though is somebody that people know, and Brian Dennehy is definitely a name that people know, and they're in the film as well. And it's a really cool film about underground boxing, and James Marshall plays a troubled kid who meets up with Cuba Gooding Jr. and they have different fights and stuff like that, and it's just a nice story, and is more of an action film.
Yeah, I remember flashes of it just over time, but I had to go back and think. Like I literally went through my brain like, wait a second, that's not the Russell Crowe movie. That there's no way. No, but I do remember that. I also like Brian Dennehy, of course. My exposure to him for me was the movie FX and FX2, which are pre this era. Is that correct?
Yeah, just slightly.
FX
yeah,
is.
FX was, but FX2 comes out right before this, so yeah, right around it.
Yep. So that's my knowledge of it. And it was it's interesting to see another boxing movie, which should, if you're a fan of the show, you should not be surprised that Tony loves boxing movies, because here we go, we cue him up in it. Now, one of the films that you see is a movie that I'd like to talk about for a second, because I think you know more about it. I legitimately had no idea what this movie was. I watched the trailer, and after watching the trailer, which by the way is a classic trailer, when we announce the movie, don't leave the show to go do this, but at some point, if you don't watch the movie, also watch the trailer. It has the classic Don Fontaine trailer scenario where he just says fragments of sentences and then someone on screen finishes the line. Like, it'd be like, in a world of time cops and criminals, I'll get you, sucker, or whatever. It'd be something stupid like that, but it's like very Don Fontaine. It's that kind of thing. And his voice didn't fit the trailer based on how the trailer worked, but the cast is incredible. So tee this one up. I've set it up for you. Let's talk through it because I'm very excited about this movie.
You're very excited. Yeah, I mean, Article 99.
That's
Good
it.
film. I mean, it's about these guys who it's about working with the VA and the veterans in a hospital, and how our veterans are mistreated in hospital settings, and it's got a brilliant cast: Ray Liotta, Kiefer Sutherland, Forrest Whitaker. I mean, it's a tremendous.
John C. McGinley.
Yeah, I mean, it's loaded.
And now the only reason I bring up John C. McGinley being in this is because it's him showing up as a doctor. If you're unfamiliar with him, he played, I forget his name, but he was kind of the a-hole doctor on Scrubs. It turns out he's great at the end, but he was the edgier doctor, the primary doctor on Scrubs. And so the older guy, but he's literally on Scrubs in this movie playing a witty doctor, because that's John C. McGinley, who you and I both love. The Rock as being one of those movies. We'll get to it eventually, but he's fantastic in that. Or I haven't seen the movie, but it's fantastic to see him in that spot.
Yeah.
The movie in the trailer, and again, I have never seen this film. The movie in the trailer is billed as a comedy, or basically a dramedy is what we would call it now. Is that an accurate depiction?
This is an accurate depiction of that film. I mean, the trailer pretty much sums it up for the most part. And I mean, yeah, there's a lot of comedy in it. Not I mean, it's not slapstick comedy, but there's a lot of sarcasm and stuff like that. People will laugh at some of the stuff, but I mean, yeah, it's a very serious natured film as well, though. But it's got a good story, and it's well done.
It's fun because it's again, I can't wait to watch it for myself eventually. But what I thought was really cool about it was just the idea that it's rogue doctors trying to do the right thing, and it's interesting because go look at that movie and look at our healthcare situation now for both veterans and non-veterans. I mean, even anybody that's dealing with healthcare stuff, and it's these rogue doctors just trying to do literally the right thing to support. It's a fascinating film that I think the commentary from that movie, interesting and enough, one of the things I love about this show, but the commentary from that film, even though it's dated from 92, it holds up today and it's got some relevant points in it, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah, for somebody who's never seen the movie, you actually summed it up pretty brilliantly. Good job.
Well, thank you. Unlike the next film, which currently would be canceled to all hell if it came out today. The next film is a film that I know very well. And I know this film so well because I absolutely adored it. I saw it in the theaters. I watched it as a kid a lot for whatever reason. I really loved the movie Ladybug, starring Rodney Dangerfield and the late Jonathan Brandis. Is that right? Jonathan Brandis?
Yeah, Jonathan Brandis.
Whoa, why'd I get balloons? That was weird. I don't know. Some kind of Apple thing. But Jonathan Brandis in that movie, absolutely, I love it. But if you don't know the plot line, Tony, I'm going to go ahead and let you get canceled. Go ahead, set this one up for us.
So this is Rodney Dangerfield, of course, the man, the legend, and he there's a whole thing where he's having an issue with his boss at his current job, and so they make him be the head coach of a little girls ladies soccer team, and he goes there and they're terrible. Obviously, it's like a Bad News Bears type scenario with soccer, and he decides to dress up the son of his girlfriend, who's played by Jonathan Brandis, who's a very, very good soccer player, dress him up like a girl so he can be on the soccer team. I mean, let's be honest, we're kind of going through it right now. It's kind of a, something, but yeah, I mean, let's not talk about politics or anything here, but I mean, way before its time, definitely.
Yeah, it would never make it today. It is a funny movie. It is done very innocently, and not making light of anybody that is in that situation, but it's just an awkward thing nowadays because in our current culture, that's a political conversation and this movie would be canceled and all that. But the fun of the movie is that although Jonathan Brandis' character is very good, it does something well, which is that it takes away the idea of him being the star, and eventually the young ladies rise up and do it themselves, and they figure out how to conquer and win on their own. So they pull him out of the equation, and suddenly I think he breaks his leg or something. Doesn't something happen to him? It's been a while since I've seen it, but
No,
he gets injured or something.
He's falling for the other girl,
Kimberly. Yeah.
And who's played by Vanessa Shaw, and
Yep.
and so he pulls himself out of the equation altogether. So I mean,
That's right.
it's really a good film. I mean, you're talking about canceling, but to be real honest with you, the film as it plays on really kind of takes all that into account. So I mean, it's kind of a cool film.
It's fun.
I've probably seen the film probably 50 times.
Same. And I mean, I could give you a line from it, and it's my favorite Rodney Dangerfield line, which is, "All I know is I got a lot of balls." I just remember that line. Classic. As a kid. It was just potty humor, but interesting for me. I wasn't, and rightfully so. So that was my first exposure to Rodney Dangerfield. I didn't exactly know who he was as a kid because most of his content was a little bit on the R side of things, and my mom knew who he was, and my parents, both of them. And so I didn't get to see a lot of Rodney. Like I had never seen Caddyshack. I had never seen any of those kind of films because of the edginess of it. And so that was one of those movies where it was PG-13, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, so I got to watch it and I was very excited. But I also had a crush on the girl, Vanessa Shaw. Is that what you said her name was? Yeah, I had like a crush on her. I'm Jonathan Brandis too. Like she's just, they did a great job of building opposite Medicine Man, where it was a terrible romance. This was a fantastic romance for young men, or women, I guess too, anybody involved. But it was just a much better approached movie, and I enjoyed it. If you haven't seen that movie, it is fun to watch. It is a fun little movie.
And if you like Vanessa Shaw, she's older, sexier, and 40 Days, 40 Nights much later on in her career.
No, it's very true. Good point. Very good point. Very good point. So you go from Ladybugs, seeing this movie, and there's a little bit of a theme on this show that's occurring. Like, that there's two themes that we have. We have me always talking about the girls I had crushes on, apparently. And then there's the theme of Tony taking innocent parents or grandparents to see absolutely batshit crazy movies. And one of those is a Rutger Hauer movie called Split Second.
Mm-hmm. Split Second. So this is another film that kind of makes the list, right? So I saw this. I got to set it up a little bit here, okay? Because there's a little bit of backstory here. So I was in Atlanta with my parents, going to like an Atlanta Braves baseball game and seeing some friends and stuff like that. And we went there during the Rodney King riots.
Holy smokes.
Okay. And for anybody who remembers that historic event, we were in Atlanta, and of course there was a lot of stuff going on in Atlanta during that time frame as well. And we were in the hotel room, and the trailer for Split Second comes on the television, and it just looked like the most marvelous action movie of all time. And I had to see it, and it was one of those films. I was like, "Oh, Rutger Hauer, action movie. It's gonna be killer," And then my grandparents loved Rutger Hauer.
Why? Why is that? What is that about Rutger Hauer?
Yeah, because my grandpa was always big into action movies and stuff. He loved like Nighthawks and Blind Fury and a lot of the films that he did. He was a huge fan of his. So I mean, so they really were big fans of his, and they liked all his like crazy characters and stuff. We were also all big fans of the movie The Hitcher.
That's a classic, though, right? The Hitcher is where a lot of people.
Classic. Yeah, that's a classic Hauer film, and my grandpa liked that film. Everyone's liked. My mom loves that film. I love that film. So it's not a bad leap to get here. This is just a really awkward film for him, and it's aliens. It's just a bad alien film, and it's got a couple good lines in it. But that's about it, man. I mean, it just really wasn't a really good film. The trailer made it out to be a great film. Just not really well done. But I did. But go ahead.
I was just going to ask, do you remember if this was put out by Canon or one of those companies, like the classic? Because I've seen it recently, believe it or not. Don't ask me why, but I do enjoy watching like bad movies from time to time. And this is in that category because it's about it's in the future, and it's in London, and London's underwater, and they have to go find a serial killer that's an alien, and there's rats, these giant rats. It's as dumb as it sounds, but I think it was. I'm not for sure, but if it was, it seems like it's one of those Canon or Golden Globus or one of those movies where they basically made really good trailers and really good posters. And little film history for you guys that don't know, a lot of movies got made this way, is that they would literally sell the poster. There's a great documentary out there on it, but they would sell the poster. And so the posters were epic, dude. They were amazing. A lot of Chuck Norris movies were in that window. So they'd sell the poster at AFI or the film festival or whatever it is, but they would sell them there at Film Market. And then they would make the movie, and the movies were crap, but the posters did so well, they'd pre-sell it. And so what would happen is foreign markets would see Rutger Hauer in a really well-cut trailer, and then they would go pay to see this movie. And I think that's what this one might have been. It doesn't matter if it's not, but great history lesson if you wanted to learn about it. Fun bit. What was your grandparents' takeaway on this flying turd?
So they weren't a big fan of it, but I mean, I'm not the one who dragged them there. Let's get that straight right now. They picked me up at the Arnold School. I was trying to tell the story. You interrupted me. They picked me up at the Arnold School one day, and because I wasn't driving yet, I don't drive till October of that year, so they picked
Right.
me up in March of I'm sorry, May of 1992. Picked me up and took me to this movie. They wanted to see it, and they said, "Let's go see the new Rutger Hauer film." And I said, "Great, let's do it." And that's how it happened. I did not drag them to it, pal.
Classic stuff. It is fascinating that I do remember that now that you've said it. I remember not the split second part, but I do remember Rutger Hauer being one of your granddad's guys. Like, we all have like a guy, especially in the action movie era of the 90s. We all had a guy. Like, there's another movie on this list coming up that I had a guy in. I was a big fan of, and God rest him. But then there's also like, was it Jeff Speakman? Was that
Jeff
the guy?
That's another guy you'll like later on down the road. Yeah.
Yeah. See, so it's all in this 90s window of action heroes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here's a controversial movie you have on your list, because this movie is bananas. And I love it. Don't get me wrong. It is a classic. There's no doubt.
It's a classic.
Do you know the box office on this? It couldn't have performed very well.
It did okay. I mean, it was like $10 million. It wasn't huge by any means. It wasn't like a colossal flop or anything like that. Because back in the day, it was harder to flop sometimes back in the day because you had secondary markets.
Right.
True secondary markets like VHS, rentals, sales, true cable, network TV, and stuff like that. So you had to be a really monster budget to flop for the most part.
It's an interesting thing that will take a little second to talk through. It is that, just so you guys know what he's talking about. You understand, some people understand secondary markets, but things like Amazon.
You haven't even said the movie yet.
Oh, I'm going to tee it up. But secondary markets, what's fascinating is, for a lot of folks that don't know, like, the secondary market isn't just like, nowadays people think of secondary market as Netflix and Amazon Prime. Those aren't secondary markets. No. A lot of the way that works is like, the filmmakers, from our experience, at least in my experience, I had a film on, we did technically 2 of them. We had 2 films on Netflix, and those films, the way that Netflix did that deal was, it's a blanket. They just give you a chunk of money and say, here, you're done, walk away. And by the time it gets back, you don't see numbers, you don't see anything. It's not like the other side of it, when video rentals would come out, and it would be a huge deal, because back in the day, they protected the rental by saying, if you tried to buy a movie that was going out into rental in the 90s, it would cost you $100 to buy the movie. It was like $120 or something. Yeah. And they protected it. And yeah, now they just throw them away. They just throw them up on Netflix right away. I mean, of course, the pandemic shifted that even worse, to where we were having movies that should have been released in theaters straight to Netflix or straight to HBO Max or whatever it is. Just so you guys know, secondary market. Now, I want to set up what the plot line of this is, and we'll give people like 2 seconds to figure it out. But it is about, is it a husband and wife?
Husband and wife, yeah.
They get sucked into it. Why am I getting balloons again?
I don't know.
What is this with balloons?
And they basically, he's a big TV watcher, and he sells his soul, and yeah, it's a whole charade.
He sells his soul, gets sucked into basically the afterlife.
All these old TV shows. I want people to watch this film. It's going to be a pick later, and I want people to watch it. I don't want to give away too much.
Yeah. Okay. Totally good.
But I saw it when I went to the Dollar Theater.
And so the name of this movie, we'll give you a break if you can figure it out.
Stay tuned.
Go ahead. Stay tuned, man.
John Ritter and Pam Dauber. Yeah.
And it's fantastic, and it's funny, and it's clever. It actually would be, if I was ever going to pitch for a remake of something, I think it would be hilariously genius if someone did that now. And the reason why is, with so many streaming services, it just is a totally different beast if you just adapt it for a streaming side of things. I personally think you can make it funny.
I don't. You
hate remakes, though.
I don't love that idea.
Yeah, you don't like any remakes. No remakes.
Not for remaking, like putting it in the streaming world. That would suck.
See, I think it's just relevant to nowadays.
Yeah.
That's how I'm looking at it. Got to update. Nobody watches TV anymore. I have a young kid that doesn't even know what a 30-second ad is. He keeps making them 33 seconds. True story.
Gotcha.
All right, so stay tuned. We'll get to that on the list when we get around to it. Rapid fire, Jason, what?
Jason Lee, man.
It's not Jason Lee.
Brandon Lee.
It's Brandon Lee. I keep
You
saying
got,
Jason Lee.
you got all your Lees mixed up, bro.
I got the wrong Lee. Jason Lee's not even born.
You got Lee, you got Brandon Lee, and you're confusing them all, and it's Brandon Lee.
It's Brandon Lee. It's a great movie, though. I love Rapid Fire. That's a classic action film. Yeah, Powers Boots is the villain, right?
Yep. Yeah, it's wonderful. I mean, it kind of teased him up to be the Crow. You know, this was the film that did it. I mean, this is the film that eventually got him that role. You know, and I know that for a fact because my buddy, not only I had a buddy who assistant directed the Crow, but his dad was the producer of the Crow. So
holy smokes,
we'll get into that movie later, but this was definitely the movie that got him that role.
Yeah, and Rapid Fire is great. What did you remember? Like, you got any takeaways of that in the theater? I mean, that's a classic.
It was amazing. I mean, I had seen the trailer and thought it was going to be this great, little action movie, but I mean, I was blown away by his stunt work in this. I mean, he's doing like pretty much everything himself, and I mean, it was incredible. And I mean, of course, obviously, everyone knows who Bruce Lee is, of course, and his dad. But I mean, a lot of people didn't actually see Bruce Lee films in theater at the time because I mean, he predated us. So seeing Brandon Lee work in the theater was spectacular. Yeah, I loved watching Rapid Fire in theater.
Yeah, it's I did not. I saw it on VHS, but it was one of those where it sticks with. It's one of those action movies that just sticks with me. It's tough to watch because I miss Brandon Lee, but it was great stuff. So I thought Mr. Baseball, which is the next movie you go see, I thought Mr. Baseball starred Michael Keaton, but I'm wrong, right? It's not Michael Keaton at all.
That's Mr. Mom.
There's a Mr. and a Mom. I got it. But Mr. Baseball, is that about Tokyo? Is there Tokyo involved in that?
Yeah, so he's a baseball player who's like kind of older and kind of getting a little long in the tooth. So they send him in a trade to Japan. And he will be on the same team with Major League's own Dennis Haysbert in this movie.
Oh, that's interesting.
Who's also in the film and who's quite good. And it's a really good baseball movie that kind of gets overlooked by a genre. There's a lot of great baseball films, and this is one of those that kind of gets a little bit more overshadowed. Made about $9-10 million at the box office, so it's kind of not a massive hit by any means. Good film for Tom Selleck, though. Yeah,
that's what I was going to say. It's Tom Selleck, and it's fun because it's Tom Selleck being Tom Selleck. I mean, he is just kind of Tom Selleck, right? He doesn't have
doing his thing.
He's doing his thing. That's exactly right. Like Burt Reynolds, he's like Burt Reynolds. He's one of those classic guys. They just do their thing, and you like it.
There's a love story underneath it too, and it's really kind of a sweet story too. It's nice.
And then you have on the list a movie that I hate more than any movie I've ever seen in my entire life.
You're not the only one, man. There's a lot of people who hate this film.
Holy smokes! Okay, I'll let you take it then. You just sell it, baby.
I liked it. It's Barry Levinson directed. Toys starring Robin Williams. You got some Robin Williams and some LL Cool J and some Joan Cusack, and I thought it was good. It's this really avant-garde take, and it's out there. It's living its life, and it's a movie that every time I bring up, people are like, "You liked that crap?" And I get a lot of flack for it, but I really don't care. I just thought it was a beautiful film. I mean, like when I saw it in theaters, I liked the way it looked. I liked the story. I saw it around Christmas time. It was a flop. This was a flop. This didn't do well at all.
Yeah. I mean, it's odd, and it is very much, an art film. Like it is the definition of I mean, not to make it a negative statement, but like it is very much Yeah, I just can't do it. I tried to rewatch it it was on HBO one time, and I tried to rewatch it, and I just can't do it. Not for me. Not for me.
That's okay. That happens. I mean, that's, it's not. That's the beauty of film in general. To me, is that not everyone's always going to have the same viewpoints or the same agreement. We've disagreed already here today.
Oh,
So I
of
mean,
course,
like,
absolutely.
and that's okay.
So we're getting towards the back half of the year here, which means you're going to have a couple of pretty epic. This has some huge movies in it, and one of them, a couple of them these are just mega movies. One of them has like maybe the soundtrack that is, I don't know where it lands now, but it's got to be one of the highest selling soundtracks in the history of soundtracks. There's no way it couldn't have, right? You have a sequel that I think outperformed the original. I may be wrong on that, but I just remember it
Close.
being very popular.
Yeah, it's close.
And
Not
then,
quite close. Pretty close.
yeah, and
Yeah.
and then you have like a movie that for years lines out of this movie, and there's still a generation that say lines out of this movie. So you set them up and tell us how you want to go through them, but just tee up this onslaught
Yeah.
of insane big blockbusters that you're stepping into here.
So this takes us actually out of the dollar theater at this point,
Right.
because we will see these in Westmobile, which is at the Carmike 10, which at this point will be almost a year old, in this part of 1992, which is November. And we'll start with, I mean, it's a classic in its own right, even being a sequel to a movie that kind of plays on a lot of the same gags. But Home Alone 2, to me, is a great film, even if Home Alone didn't exist.
100% agree. 100%.
And I loved it. It was, and this is one of those films that, my brother didn't get to go to a lot of films at the time, because he had turned 6 years old. But he goes to this movie. My brother Jeff is at this film with me, with my mom, and we have our buddies who live across the street. Not There was a house in between yours, and then on the other side of that, to the left side of that other house, this family lived, and that was the Pate family. And we'll have their mom and her two sons with us at this film as well. And it was magnificent, man. I had seen the original Home Alone at the Dollar Theater, and that was my first viewing of that film. And then this one I was just really excited for. And it happens up in New York, which I loved, because I'm just a few years removed from living in New Jersey, New York area. So everything about it was magnificent to me. And they brought back the old bad guys, and they brought back, new characters, and brought back characters that were similar to original Home Alone, with the Bird Lady and stuff like that. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah, Home Alone 2 has a wonderful soundtrack by John Williams, and it's actually there's a section of music in there that is outstanding, and it's the Dove piece whenever that little swell happens. It's a great, anyway, for me, very influential piece of music, very important to my family. My mom still uses that as gives them a lot of times at Christmas. She'll make doves and give them. It's a very big part of, or whatever it is. It might not be a dove, but I just remember there's a bird.
Turtle doves.
It's a very big turtle doves. Yeah, it's a very big part of our family Christmas culture, and so it's big deal, big movie in that way. Now the next piece in the mix is a movie that annoyed me to no end, only because the soundtrack was literally everywhere. You could not escape the song from The Bodyguard by Whitney Houston. And Tony's going to sing a rendition. I'm just kidding. I wouldn't ask you to do that.
No,
nobody can hit those notes. Nobody can hit those notes. That soundtrack, I mean, that movie and that song, right, and that soundtrack, I mean, it blew up. And we're not necessarily a total music show here. I don't know how long it was on the charts, but that song seemed to and it is part of pop culture forever, right? That song is forever embedded into it. And I never saw it. I didn't, because I hated the song so much. I got tired of hearing it, because my aunt played it, my mom played it, all the women in my life played it. But it's actually a pretty good movie when I watched it as an adult. When I went back to it, I actually enjoyed it a good bit. And The Bodyguard, Kevin Costner, Whitney Houston, maybe one of her first movies. I'm not sure, but
yeah, it was
well-made movie.
It was definitely a movie that, Kevin Costner got the film. He wanted Whitney Houston to do it, and she originally turned it down, and then comes back to it and says, and when she finds out that Kevin Costner specifically asked for, she does the film, and of course the soundtrack charts like 7 singles. It's huge.
Yeah.
And I mean, everyone always remembers that one song, but it's just there's a lot of charting singles off this album, and it was
Yeah.
great. I own this album. I mean, as much as I am into hardcore music, but you know how diverse I can be. I love Whitney Houston. I mean, I was a big fan of hers in the '80s too, and so this was I liked the soundtrack. I know some other friends of mine who had the soundtrack. I know you didn't have the soundtrack, but a
No,
lot
sure.
of other people did.
The thing about it though is like the soundtrack's good, and then the movie, for being one of those like romantic, what, I don't even know what the genre would be if you want. I mean, it's not solely romantic, because there's a thriller element, and there's tension, and there's not a lot of action, but there's some action to it, for building upon the idea of, we've had a couple of, well, we don't, but Medicine Man being the other movie that we're talking about being a romantic adventure film. Let's just use that language. It's so bad compared to this. This, you invest into the characters, you develop a relationship, you start to get it. And it turns out it's a pretty good movie. I just wasn't mature enough to appreciate it at the time. That's just what I got to go with.
I mean, I'd call it a romantic thriller. I'd be happy with that. I mean, it has all those elements. I mean, I think that's what makes it kind of the cool movie that it is. I mean, it's not, there's some people that probably don't like it. That's fine. I mean, but to me, and I know there's always those people out there that like, kind of like what you said. You hear the soundtrack 800,000 times, and you're kind of like, I am never watching that film again. And I hear people that do that with Titanic. That'll come much later.
Oof, tough. And then you have the movie, and the line that all of us have said at least once. If you're listening to this podcast, chances are you're in the age bracket that you can't handle the truth. That line has been uttered by more people in more, not just us. It's pop culture popular. Like that line has been forever. It's one of the strongest court case type, like legal type movies. What a fantastic movie that, I guess for me, just putting Jack Nicholson as such a kind of hard villain, conflicted, and it's just, again, A Few Good Men is the film we're talking about. What is your takeaway on that? And you see it. I see a note here. You see this one with your grandparents. What a great choice. Didn't have Rucker Hauer, thank God, but they pulled this one in. You see this movie. I mean, did you get it as a kid? I mean, again, we've established, and I mean this with all kindness, you're a very intellectual individual. You're highly intelligent. Did you get this all the way as a kid, or as you grew up, when you watch it again, did you pick up on nuanced stuff? I mean, what is your takeaway on this movie? It's pretty dense movie.
Obviously, when you watch it as a kid, it means something different than when you watch it as an adult. I mean, you take away different things, and certain themes are a little bit more mature at different times, so you understand them better. And that's why a lot of the movies I see as a kid, that I saw as a kid, I'll rewatch them as an adult, because, oh yeah, I did. Oh yeah, I saw that differently as a child. Oh yeah, I saw. It's like, so even movies I didn't necessarily like as a kid, kind of like Medicine Man, I'll rewatch those as an adult, being like, oh okay, that one I didn't really like as an adult either. But this one I've always loved. The performances are just first class. And obviously, you've said it. I mean, you can't handle the truth line. I mean, I know I've said it probably hundreds, maybe even 1,000 times, and I'm sure you've said it, and everybody else has said that at some point in time, and maybe even people had no idea that comes from this movie have said
Fair point.
And yeah, I mean, it's definitely a pop culture line. I did see this one with my grandparents and my mom, and the family. So it was one of those movies. They came down for Christmas in that time frame, and we went and saw this first run over at Carmike 10 over in the West Mobile side. And yeah, I mean, it was a fabulous film from start to finish. I love Tom Cruise. I mean, I think he's a great actor anyway. One of the last great movie star cinema guy. You know, I mean, one of the guy he always loves taking his movies to the cinema and making a big spectacle, and I adore that about him, even if he gets some negative press. But I adore that about him. He's that's a cool thing. But that Demi Moore was, you know, super hot at the time in her career, and you know, and it's weird because you know Nicholson kind of endured and he kind of had multiple hot streaks in his career. Like he's
Mhm.
obviously always been, you know, one of the top guys. But I mean, in but he was, you know, huge in like 60s, 70s, and kind of tapered off a little bit in spots, and then comes back so strong in the 90s with a lot of big hits. And this is one of them. And it's just he's got a perfect performance here. It's a perfect performance. It's not a good performance. It's a perfect performance.
And now I don't remember what it was. Was he was nominated or did he win an Oscar for
Yeah.
one of these as
Yeah, he's up. I
Academy
mean,
supporting
it's yeah,
maybe?
I mean, and he was up several times. You know, I mean, he's won before several times before. So I mean, yeah, he's the man.
It is. It's a classic movie. It holds up. It's just one of those that like I if you're an aspiring director or you want to see how direction is done in a, especially in a talking piece, that's one of the movies I suggest because uh, the performances you get out of them, even just like down to little stuff that other people that don't direct or produce films probably don't pay attention to, but even the blocking elements in this are spot on. It's just a really well composed film and the performances shine through for that. And that's who carries that movie is the actors. It is, there's no FX, there's nothing crazy. It is a pure actors movie and a great one at that. So a good way to close out that
Did
year.
did you like that better than Toys?
Just a wee bit, just a wee
Yeah,
bit, just a
that's,
smidge. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And that soured. Unfortunately, Toys soured me on Joan Cusack until later on in the '90s when she showed up in Gross Point Blank. I hated her because of that movie. I just couldn't stand that movie so much. It's terrible. And then she shows up in one of my all-time favorite movies, and I'm good with her again. But it took her a while,
Yeah, I mean
for
this,
sure.
and like you said, this kind of closes us out of 1992, and
Yep,
you know our friendship takes a big leap forward in 1993, and I mean for people that are kind of wondering like, well, they haven't seen a lot of these movies together. We're gonna see a lot of movies together
yep.
starting now. With the next episode, we are almost inseparable in 1993. I
That's
mean,
right.
inseparable that year.
And there's a lot of things that go into that of both of us. Like you're transitioning to a school, but it's a smaller school, so the friend pool, you have friends, but I mean the friend pool there isn't as big as a traditional high school or whether it's public or private, right? It's just a smaller school. I'm transitioning to a new school where my friend group was extremely small because I was transitioning into a private school where a lot of kids had grown up in that. So really part of the catalyst of this is we both love movies and then we're on the same street and then we just build upon this fact of like we lean on each other. I mean, it's how best friendships work, right? You just build on it and we build on it. And this is going to 93 is where that stuff really explodes. Looking forward to those episodes ahead. Before we get ready to wrap this bad boy up, we've got the picks of the week. I think they're very strong picks of the week. Very contrasty, very different picks of the week. Go ahead and tee those up. Here they are, ladies and gentlemen. Tony's picks of the week.
Yeah, I did too this week because I mean, I we were talking about them and started thinking, and there's a lot of these movies that people probably haven't checked out. They should check them out. Article 99 is a lost movie. There's no doubt about it. I mean, that cast, people should see that film, and it's very relative to what we go through today. I think people would dig it. And I mean, if you're political, whatever, it doesn't really matter. I mean, there's some politics that play out in that film, but it's just a good film, very well driven by great performances, and should check it out for sure. And then the second one, of course, Stay Tuned is just a classic to me, man.
I love it.
It's a film that look if you've watched TV back especially in the 80s and 70s, it's this movie just handles all that. He's going to go back into some of the most classic programs of all time, and you get to see him. I mean, there's even I don't want to ruin it, but there's some references to some old John Ritter stuff, and it's really really cool. I would highly recommend watching Stay Tuned, especially if you're looking for a laugh. That movie is hilarious.
It's good. It is very different. And again, interesting take, a different approach to a movie that they did something different and it works really well to you and I versus where we're split was someone who did something different with the movie Toys and it didn't work at all.
Right.
50%. 50% worked, 50% didn't.
Yeah.
But I love that. Great list. I'm going to try and find Article 99. I'm going to try and find Stay Tuned on whatever platform I can get my hands on it. I do not own those on DVD, so I'll have to dig around for them, but I'm going to see if I can track those down. I'll do my best. I'll throw, if I find a good link or I can find a way to find them, I will try and do my best to throw them into the Facebook group so that they're for people when this episode drops, and you guys and gals can go look that up and enjoy those movies. Again, if you haven't done so, we would very much appreciate and love it if you would just zip over to your favorite podcast app, whether that's Spotify, Apple, Google Play, whatever it is, wherever you're listening to this or watching. We're also on YouTube. So wherever you might be, if you're on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget the notification so you get the ding when we're ready to go. But also, if you'll just give us some love in the podcast side, feedback is always welcome. If you don't want to just trash us in a review, which is fine. If you don't want to trash us in review, you can always send us an email. Tony, what's that email address?
Yeah, it's again, it's back for our future at gmail.com.
There you go. So if you just send whatever you want over or join the Facebook group, we're there. We're hanging out. We're having conversations. And is there anything else we need to say before we close this one out?
I love you all. Thank you for listening.
We appreciate you guys. Thanks for listening. That's going to do it for the show. See you at the... Damn it. I can't keep saying that.
Gotta stop doing that one.